Hey folks, it's Kelly. I'm the lifestyle engineer, and we're kind of excited today because today we are going to talk to Hazel Urquhart. She wrote a book called The Art of You, and it is about how art works as kind of a therapist in and of itself. At least I think I got that right. And so, and I got to admit, my fiance is an artist, so he has gotten me to go and like paint stuff, which I have not done since like middle school. It was kind of cool. So I'm kind of excited about this because maybe then I'll also learn something to do something different with the art. Hopefully you will too. So let us know okay, so what is the book about? I mean, I kind of took the shot in the dark, but what is your book about?
Right. Well, the book is based on a theory of working with art from Carl Rogers, who was a person-centered counsellor, therapist going back in the 60s, I think 50s, 60s. And his work was taken on by a lady called Hazel Urquhart, who actually took the person-centered counselling principles and applied them to art. Very clever stuff. But it's really about using art to gain more personal insight, and art itself can kind of just cut through all the subconscious crap, and a lot of people just don't like talking, they find difficulty talking about their feelings, and sometimes by producing an image, you can actually get more out there and explore that image. And it's amazing how much information can actually be taken out of that image. And a lot of people, especially people who've experienced trauma, kind of find that quite a safe way of working because they can put the image onto the paper and then it's as if they're talking about something separate from them. So, and the therapist or counsellor can encourage that. But I want to because going back to how I sort of started the book started when I was working with a charity in Brighton, working with people who've been abused in childhood. And we got some money to run some groups. And part of what we were trying to do was obviously working with art, raising awareness in the community about sexual abuse, because it's still very much a taboo subject. People have difficulty talking about it. And I was invited, because I was a trained counsellor and I trained in person-centered art therapy, to run the groups. While I was running the groups, the women said they got a lot out of it, but they couldn't afford to go on to do further art therapy, or they just couldn't afford to work with anyone. And at the time, this is going back to just past the millennium, there wasn't actually a lot of art therapists about, who were actually working, and the ones that were very expensive. So that planted the seed of the idea that I thought, actually, I've worked with art all my life, as a healing tool. And I thought, you don't actually need a therapist. You can't actually do this by yourself. I mean, obviously, ideally, if you can work with a therapist, but there is a way of doing this where you can actually work with art, at home on your own. There's a lot more books around as well now, and at the time there wasn't. So I spent, it was probably a couple of years after that group, to be honest, because I was quite busy, that I got around to actually doing the book. And it took me probably about 6 months to kind of get the idea together. It's like, how can I give people a mini workshop experience, like what I'd run in the groups, and they could do it itself at home. And so, as I say, I worked on this idea. It took me 6 months, really amazing creative process. And one day the penny just dropped and I came up with this idea. And the book itself is actually a booklet, really. It's I'll show you, actually. I'll show you. Okay. It's tiny, it's a tiny little book. And because I wanted to make it simple. I didn't want a big theory, loads of theory. That's not what I wanted. I wanted it to be as simple as possible to learn. And so I actually came up with a set of cards. So yeah, that goes with the book. And the cards, the first lot of cards, I called them gateway cards. And their idea is to get you sort of into a kind of creative mood. So it's got like mini visualizations, because not everybody visualizes in the same way. Not everybody can get an image in their head. It's different learning styles. Some people are more auditory, some people are kinesthetic, which means they feel through the learning. And so the
Right.
cards that are kind of exploring different ways that would appeal to, to different people. And it's about experimenting really to see what works best for you, what helps you kind of get into working with art and imagery. The second lot of cards, the best way I can explain it, these are just ideas for you to explore through art. Loads of ideas. What would I paint if I painted my secret? Or, just something you can explore. And then the third lot of cards, reflection cards, are the actual art therapy questions. So you can,
Okay.
there's a lot of questions that you can actually ask to learn through the art. And then you go to journal, because journaling is a part of the process as well, obviously,
Oh,
because
journaling is huge.
it's reflecting and on your artwork, and I've explained different ways in the book that you can kind of work with the cards, in very simple ways. So I hope that's explained it. It's quite hard to explain. But
No, that was really good. I mean, because okay, we have a basic understanding that okay, you meditate before and you visualize, which I mean, and I agree, it is hard for some people to visualize. I am more of an auditory person, so music has always been my thing. And you can use music for therapy too. But using art, so that visualization piece is very difficult for me to hold that image in my head long enough to get it out. So totally understand if somebody has that issue. And then, but I mean, having cards that kind of help you walk you through that process, I think would make it easier than, well, here, just, hold this image of this tree that represents whatever pain you're feeling. Or I do remember reading a little bit about art therapy at some point. And then
a lot of people, a lot of the books do sort of so even when I trained in person-centered art therapy, what they did in the training was sort of draw a treasure chest in the sea or something. So they gave you an image. So, but I really think it's really important that people work with their own images, because that's coming from you. And even if it's when people say they can't image, there's always a felt sense of an image, even if you're sitting and a word comes to you, that's your image. You see what I mean? It's like if it says to you, if I say to you, think of an image of how you're feeling right now. If you're a kind of auditory person, you might just hear a word, a cat or something. See what I mean? So, and then, and you don't have to be good at art. You can do a few little scribbles of the shape of a cat. And it's very surprising how much you can get information you can get out of that, by looking at the colours used, looking at the process of what you're doing as you're sort of drawing the image. There's so many different ways you can actually glean information out of that image. Simple images.
Well, I mean, and the great thing about art is that it's not just painting or drawing. I mean, you can, get some clay and model it out. You can.
Oh, absolutely.
You can take found objects and put them together in a way that kind of shows what the image should be, or what you're feeling, or that there's so many different ways to use it that it's pretty limitless on how you can express yourself.
Absolutely. I say that in the book as well, that you might try it, it might not be for you. You might need to find something else, like working with clay, sculpting, dancing, all these creative ways of expressing yourself can be outlets for your own personal development. Singing, I've got a friend who's a singer, and I've also, my own daughter is actually a comedy improviser, and a lot of people come to her with lack of confidence, but they find their confidence through comedy. So they're all creative ways of finding, healing and ways or insight into yourself, for your own personal development.
Yeah, I mean, and some people get it from simply just sitting and talking. That's mostly the people that I work with. And then some people find that you have to have a creative outlet where, art and dance and singing, comedy is even creative. I mean, where they come up with some of that material, I'm like, I have no idea, but I'm glad that they do. Love comedy.
Well, I mean, I'd like to share with you a little bit about how I first started working with art. When I sort of left school when I was 15, I kind of went to work in a paintbrush factory. It's quite interesting because I just remembered that lately. And a lot of the time, I realized arts played a big part in my life. And when I was in my 30s, I kind of decided I wanted to go back to education because I'd left school so early. And I enrolled on a course which was a diploma in humanistic psychology, which sounds quite grand, but actually it turned out to be quite an experience, working in a group of 32 people. And it was like a full-on 2 years of therapy. It was, I know, I didn't expect it. And I just think most of the people that went on to it didn't expect that either. But part of what happened for me was I started to experience a lot of anxiety because they were asking you to explore a lot of childhood stuff, and it was full on. And I don't even know, I think the tutor at the time said to me, I said, I'm feeling really anxious, I feel like I want to leave this course. She says, well, why don't you try drawing your feelings? And at the time I thought, what, draw my feelings? I hadn't heard of it, and so I managed to do that. And I just, throughout the course, I painted constantly. And it was a way of me just, I came up with all these little images, little fairy stories, dragons, and it just came out of me. And it was just a way of coping with my feelings during the course. And so, that was, nobody was helping me with these images, just producing these images helped me deal with my feelings. And that's when I sort of first discovered the power of art for myself. And later on, that's why I became interested in working with art with other people as well. So yeah, that was kind of my experience. Like I said, just working on my own. At the end of the course, it was lovely because they actually let me do an art exhibition of all the paintings I'd actually done throughout the course. And there was probably about 100 paintings, and they stuck them all over the walls in the room at the end of the course, which was really lovely. Kind of validation that was a really important part of myself, that I was able to express myself in that way. So that was a really lovely thing that happened to me. So
that sounds really validating, where it's like, you get to express what you're feeling in something that is visual, and then be able to show that to somebody else and have them experience your story, but then also have them experience your story through their own perception of it. I mean,
yeah.
it's,
It was amazing. Yeah, it was an amazing experience. Yeah, it was lovely. And like I say, it helped me so much. And I continue, I've worked with, I have actually worked with traditional art therapists, like more psychoanalytic, for myself for a while, but to be honest, it just didn't work for me. It was very interpretive. And as a counsellor, I worked more with person-centered stuff, which is all about, just like we had a little chat earlier where you were talking about holding space for people, and there's a set of skills involved, listening, and, there's a theory behind it, but it is very much about being there and witnessing somebody's story, and helping them feel understood in the moment, and that in itself can be such a healing process. That's what I really want to encourage, with the book, that you don't have to have a therapist, you can actually hold yourself in that process. Does that make sense? I think I'm going off track a bit now.
No. I mean, well, okay. So over my lifetime, I mean, I've done therapy. I've been to like traditional talk therapy. I've also been through, I took a course, and it might sound a little odd, but it totally was cool. So it was very visual, but it was, healing yourself using tarot. The tarot cards, which I totally was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. Let's go take that. So, and my interests are kind of eclectic to begin with, but, did that. And then I did a coaching program. I did traditional therapy when I got my traumatic brain injury, and then graduated kind of into a coaching program, mostly just because the traditional therapy, they go, well, your insurance isn't going to cover it anymore, so we can't see you. And I went, oh, okay, now what do I do? And went to a guy that I didn't know he was a coach. People know that part of the story, but anyway. And then, have gone and done, my own therapy with, um, there was a YouTube person who I cannot remember their name, but I followed him for a while that did like music therapy and
Yeah.
sound therapy,
Oh,
which was
fabulous.
fantastic. And it was a unique experience because it's not only, you know, hear this, when you hear this tone, it should invoke this feeling. It was when you hear this tone, what are you feeling? Bring that awareness inside. So it was kind of this combination of listening to the tones and doing meditation. So, I mean, the variety of therapy out there, I mean, I think we need to talk about that it's not just talk therapy that we think of when you sit in a counselor's office.
Absolutely. And there's so many different kinds of therapy models as well, that people don't realize. I mean, Gestalt, psychosynthesis, and they all have um, the relationship with the client at the heart of it, but they come from completely different places, existential counseling. There's so much, and I think it's very important that people, can have a choice of what works for them, because, I know people myself who've been to see different kinds of therapists. I've done it too. I've been to see someone, and it's not the person, it's also the model of the therapy that doesn't work for you, and you can come away thinking, oh, this is me, this is about me, but no, it's not. It's actually just not working for you.
Right. And it
Like,
may
yeah,
not.
yeah,
And that's okay. And that's kind of like the,
yeah,
the great thing about the way that our brains work is that, I mean, yeah, they all run underneath like the same kind of model that, okay, you have a circumstance and a thought and a feeling, and you have a reaction or an action about it. And then that kind of
yeah,
brings you to a new circumstance and just kind of keeps going, right?
yeah,
Sorry, this is my engineering background coming out, saying, hey, here.
yeah,
I'm
no,
all about modeling and bringing things down to very simple things.
yeah,
So, but I mean, also within that, there are different solutions to the same issue that if one isn't working for you, go try something else.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
I hear so many times, well, I've tried therapy and it wasn't for me. And it's like, well, how many times did you try a therapist? If you've only tried one therapist, well, that's only one kind of therapy. It doesn't mean it's not for you. It just means that kind isn't for you.
yeah, yeah. And also, I mean, the relationship between the therapist as well is really important. It's like we can't get on with everybody. You've got to feel safe with that counselor, that therapist. So again, it's like any relationship. If you go, that's one of my bugbears, especially in the national health. We have a national health service in England, which is free. So, and I think
Oh,
there's a mindset
brag,
that
brag, just brag away that it's free.
oh well,
The
it's not
US,
that.
it's not.
It's on its knees at the moment, but in the mental health services, like I say, charities plug a lot of the gap for mental health services in the UK. They get small grants from local councils, but there's huge waiting lists for mental health services. So it's always been the bottom of the pile for funding, and yeah. So I think that I've lost my train of thought now. I've lost my train of thought.
Well, I mean, I think that mental health gets it because it's an invisible disease. I mean, you can be mentally ill and nobody can see it. And if your behavior comes out bizarre, it's like, oh, that person's just weird, steer clear of them, instead of what is going on in that person. I mean, as a general public, I don't think that we realize the amount of mental illness that we have in society. And if we brought it out and talked about it more, the stigma wouldn't be there, and it would be normal to do things like hire a therapist, hire a coach, hire somebody to help you. One, because, well, let's face it, it's nicer to go through life when you feel like you're supported. But two, when it comes to some of these things, when we talk, how we talk to ourselves, we don't necessarily hear it in our own head because it's our voice, so we believe it. But if you say those things out loud, somebody's like, oh, wait, dude, you are just not talking to yourself in a very kind way. Let's work on this.
Yeah, yeah. It's getting better in the UK because a lot of famous people have been coming out a lot lately talking about the mental health issues.
Mhm.
Even just before COVID happening, especially the two princes, Prince Harry and the other one. They talked a lot about their mental health issues following their death of their mother, Princess Diana, which has been brilliant because it's really enabling other people. That if they can talk about their mental health issues, we can talk about our mental health. So a lot of people have been talking on social media and coming out more, and there's been lots more programs in the UK, but there's still not. If you want to go and see a therapist, you either have to pay privately or you have to go on a huge waiting list. And in the main, the therapy you get is very much, it's one therapy, it's cognitive behavioral therapy, which is supposed to be the one that's been kind of researched the most, and you get so many sessions. And again, you go to see someone who you might not get on with, it might just not, it's not the right therapy, it's not the right person. So it's still a massive issue that there isn't enough services and enough choice of different things, unless you can pay for it yourself. Yeah.
And you can, you can create it yourself. I've done a lot of work on myself on my own by picking up self-help books, different ones that interested me. And some of them, I will admit, some of those self-help books are like very fluffy and not full of a whole lot of substance. That they are. But even within those books, there's always some nugget of something that I've been able to walk away with going, yep, that helped and was worth the $5, $10, $15 for a book, whatever it cost. Books are not very expensive. No. So, by all means, do a book, do something creative, look at it, even if it's just take a deck of regular playing cards. Well, 7 of spades, what is that going to mean for me? What does the spade do? Just get creative with it. Or even go online and look at different artwork, and does this invoke something that I feel in it? And if it does, what is that? Can I figure out what that is? There's so many ways that we can help ourselves. And then when we get to a point where it's like, okay, not just, and if you're on a waiting list for mental health services, which I know in larger cities in the US, that is a thing. Here where I live, there's, usually not a waiting list for mental health services, but still, if you're on a waiting list, pick up a self-help book, really just go out and try different something to help you along until you can get there.
Oh, there's so much out there. There's so much out there now, isn't there? Especially on social media. There's so many great support groups. It's just finding a group where you can relate to, and there is a lot of self-help stuff out there, like you say.
Oh yeah, there's a lot that you can do. And then once you get the therapy and you feel healed, then you go to coaching and you go, okay, I'm going to go from this point, and how do I go forward? And you're just going to graduate into different things, and you can expand your horizons.
Kelly, it never stops. We're never fixed. I've just been through a kind of month of negativity and sort of, I'm trying to do something new, and I've been really struggling, and it's like, come on, and all my old stuff came up, you can't do it, you're not good enough, and I've had to really dig deep again, to sort of, and turn to books, turn to some books, to motivate me and lift me up again, and so, what you're saying about books, they can be really helpful, to kind of get you out of that negative space.
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter how much education about the brain you have. The same shit comes up for everybody, no matter what. It does. You try something new and your brain's automatically like, nope, can't do that. Not going to happen. Nope, you're not going to be successful. You're going to fall on your face. People are going to laugh at you. It's all the assumptions of, and it usually does go back to childhood of, that whole kids are mean. They laugh at other kids. That's just the way that it is.
Yeah.
And then I want to kind of circle back to something though, is that you had brought up therapy and learning the different modules. And then the one thing that I found the most interesting about therapists and training, and even when I was coaching and training, is that there is no definition of a functional person, because we're all always healing. There's a definition for a dysfunctional person, and then different levels of that, of, how, so we're all broken in some way. That there is, so anybody who's feeling broken, you're not alone. everybody is.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love I just love the term, the wounded healer. I remember that often because it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're all on a journey, and people might look up to you as some sort of expert, but no, I'm not. I'm just like you, I've got the same fears, and, I just done a couple of year course on something, that doesn't make me any better than you or different from you. Like you say, we have the same fears, the same feelings that come up in us. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. And again, we can probably all trace them all back to childhood, but
Yeah.
it's just it's amazing how people are like, oh well, I'm gonna get to this point where I'm healed. I hate to break it to you, honey. There's no such magical land. There's no unicorn. There's
Yeah.
no fruit and manna from the heavens coming. It just doesn't exist. It's a matter of, how do I deal with this? How
Yeah.
do I deal with
Yeah.
this in this moment? And then, okay, well, that feels great. I'm going to go do something else. And then I'm going to come into a situation and, oh, all this stuff came up again. Well, now how do I deal with it now?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, the same things. It's like little threads, different challenges we face in our life can bring everything up to the surface again. And we might have those strategies we've learned, but they might not work at that particular situation. So we have to find a new set of strategies to do move us forward. That's the way I see it anyway.
Oh, yeah.
You could get some core things that work all the time, but sometimes if we're facing something new in our lives, I mean, I'll tell you a story. It's quite sad, but one of the things that happened to me was when I was working in the charity, I worked with a lady, and I'd been working with her for years, and I would call us friends. We were colleagues, but also friends. But she started to have a bit of some quite serious mental health challenges because she'd been overworking and taking too much on. And I told her to go home, and that morning she rang me and said she wasn't feeling very well and panicking. And I said, look, I lived about 15 minutes away, so I actually went on the train. And as I got to the top of the street, there's an ambulance there. And to cut a long story short, she had actually fallen out of a window and died. No,
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
I know. I hope this isn't a big trigger for anybody, but that completely shook my world. That's have to say. I've
Of
never experienced
course.
it like that before. It was probably one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. But anyway, and I was complete, with all my training, with all my therapy, I was just completely at sea with it all. I just went. I kind of carried on supporting other people for a bit longer as well, which created a massive burnout for me, because there's people in the organization who knew her too, and I was like supporting them. And yeah, so, that was a big challenge that happened that I had to deal with. I had to kind of move through, and it took me quite a
Right.
while to find different ways to kind of deal with that experience. So it doesn't matter, how much therapy you've done, how many books you've read. Sometimes things life throws stuff at you, and you have to kind of find a new way to deal with that and move through it, and all the issues that sort of thing brings up. I mean, that's quite an extreme example, but of what we were sort of talking about. But I kind of felt that was really important to share that because sometimes you have big things to deal with.
Yeah.
So,
And sometimes we look at things and we're like, oh, to me it feels like a big thing, but I'm gonna like minimize it because to nobody else it would be that way. Oh, now I just got a notification that my internet was unstable. Hopefully you can still hear me. But we minimize it because we look at it and we're like, oh, this should not be a big thing. Well, just because you experience it differently than your neighbor or your friend doesn't mean that it's not a big thing, because it is a big thing to you.
yeah, yeah,
It,
yes,
it's
yeah,
very hard to define, well, what is a big thing and what is a little thing. None of these things have it's not like a mathematical equation where there's only one right answer. It is something that has many right answers, and then there's many wrong answers involved as well.
yeah. I mean, I think I would say to anyone, whatever is bothering you, whatever is stopping you from fully being yourself or moving forward in your life, or you've got something that's stopping you, you can't move through that. You can't find a way through that. You just have to find your way through that. And there's, like we've talked about, there's so many different ways. Just reach out as well. To other people. I think that's really important. Reaching out to peers. Free support groups, like what you're running, Kelly.
I've got the toxic relationship group, which it's a free support group, and then we'll include the notes for that too. But then there's also, if things feel overwhelming, it's also taking it and saying, okay, how can I break this down into the smallest piece so I can deal with this little piece instead of the whole picture? Because so often we want to solve our problems all at once, and trying to solve them when they're this big is a whole lot harder than if, okay, well, I've got this teeny tiny step today, and then tomorrow I've got another one.
Yeah. I think that applies to anything, especially in business. Some of the people that will be watching this are in business, they get totally overwhelmed by what they have to learn. But, it's like tiny little steps at a time, Don't think you're going to know everything all at once, just tiny little steps. And doing something is better than doing nothing as well,
Oh, yeah. That's probably anything with life. Do something, it's better than doing nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay. So any last words, Hazel? If you like, if this was like the last interview you did and you had to give somebody profound advice, what is your most profound advice?
Oh no, that's a question, isn't it?
I know. I'm like good at asking the big questions.
I'd just say learn to love yourself. For me, that's one of the most important things you can do, is actually learn to love yourself. It's a very simple thing, but I think love yourself first, and then, other things will fall into place. It's something that's really, really important. Self-love.
Oh,
It's the best gift
self-love
you
is
can,
the
best gift
basis
you
of
can give
everything.
yourself.
It is. It's the basis of everything. But yet we put so little emphasis on it unless you work in the field that we work in. I mean,
especially, I shouldn't say this, but really, but it's women especially, you've got your children to look after. It's really hard. You forget to kind of take care of yourself, and you can get so distracted from looking after yourself. And looking after yourself is the most important thing you can do. Really is.
Yeah, and especially when you have family and children involved, if you take care of yourself first, you have like reserves to be able to give from when they need things. It makes it so much easier to be able to give if you have something to give.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the only way to fill yourself up is to take care of you, and that's the whole physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual realm.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you. The book is The Art of You. It's by Hazel Urquhart.
Urquhart, yes.
Yay. Oh, for a while there, I'm like, holy crap, what was the last name? So Hazel Urquhart, we'll have links in the notes. Thank you so much, Hazel. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully everybody else has a lot of fun viewing it. If you have any questions, you can get in touch with me, get in touch with Hazel. We will make sure that we answer them as much as possible. Thanks, guys. Again, I'm Kelly. I'm the lifestyle engineer. Hopefully you guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you.